God like our God. No other name worthy of all our praise. The rock of salvation that cannot be moved has proven himself to be faithful and true. There is no rock, there is no God like God. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. There's no rock, there's no God like ours. There is no rock, there is no God like our God. No other name worthy of all our praise. The rock of salvation that cannot be moved has proven himself to be faithful and true. There is no rock, there is no God like God. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along, put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. Yes, I know it's true. I'm not afraid.
Good morning, everybody. We're so glad that you're taking the time to tune in for our services, and especially you New Life Church family folks. We're so glad that you're staying faithful and committed to our online services. It's the only way that we can still somehow feel connected while we're still going through this quarantine. If you're not part of the New Life Church family, you're just checking us out, we're glad you're taking the time to do that. We hope you enjoyed the message today. And again, if you have any questions, call us, phone us, email us, text us, whatever. We'd be more than glad to take time out for you. I get a lot of people saying, when are we going to open, Pastor? When are we going to open? I can definitively say this morning, I don't know. But as soon as I know, you're going to be the first to know, and we are looking forward to getting back together as a church family. So there was this granddad that had some medical issues, and he was meeting with some consultations with some doctors, and they were trying to find out what was wrong with him. And he brought his little grandson, Alfred, with him. And so the doctors met, they did this thorough examination, and then they went to another room. But what the granddad did is he hid his little grandson, Alfred, in the closet of that room to try to find out what was going on. So after the doctors had their consultation, little Alfred escapes from the room and he runs to his grandpop, and his granddad, says, well, what did you hear? And he goes, well, Granddad, he goes, I don't know. He goes, they were muttering and they were using really big words that I couldn't understand. He says, but I did hear something at the end. And the granddad was so frantic, he said, well, what was it? What was it? And they said, well, they said they'd find everything out at the autopsy. So, kind of funny stuff right there. So we're starting a new series, and actually this is something that I preached about 11 years ago, and I thought it would be pertinent for us right now. I thought I would take it out and just kind of blow the dust off of it, because I think it really applies to us right now. And this is the question: how would you live if you knew you only had 30 days left to live? If you only had 1 month left to live, how would you spend the rest of your time? How would you build relationships or deal with relationships? I mean, what would it look like for you to prepare for eternity? Now, if you think about that. So I'm going to be sharing some scriptures, and if you want to take notes and write them down, that'd probably be a good thing. But let's start right off the bat, because as of right now, the clock is ticking. Okay, so here we go. I did some studying here at New Life in our polls and our numbers here, and I found out that the death rate here at New Life Church is 100%. It's terminal, right? Everybody is terminal. We are all going to die. That's a reality that we face. And so here in Ecclesiastes 8:8, Solomon says this: none of us can hold back our spirit from departing. None of us has the power to prevent the day of death. And that's from the New Living Translation. But look at what he said. He says, none of us can hold back our spirits from departing. You don't have the ability to stop what will be your demise. I don't have the ability to stop the day that I'm going to die. That's why the Bible says that the Lord has numbered our days. And then the psalmist somewhere said, teach us to number our days, Lord, so that we can apply our hearts to wisdom. Knowing that there's a deadline on my lifespan, I need to apply my heart to wisdom. And so this series for the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at what would it look like to live with the wisdom that causes us to live right now in light of eternity. So we've only got 30 days to make some changes, and how are we going to live in this next 30 days? How do we want to make it just absolutely the best we could? Because right now, you're already 1 day less than you were yesterday. Isn't that right? And so here we go. I know, I asked Darlene the other day, I said, thinking about this, I said, listen, are you going to still love me when I'm old and ugly? And she said, of course I do. So there's no negotiating on this. There's no bartering. There's no borrowing. You can't beg or plead your way out of this. And, just like we say you can't borrow somebody else's relationship with Christ, you also can't borrow somebody else's days. You have the amount of days that you have, and that's all you have. And none of us knows what that is. And so you had one beginning, right? And you're going to definitely have an end to that. In other words, your death certificate is just as real and valid as your birth certificate is. We have a beginning and we have an end. But here's the good thing. This life is not all there is. Right? We believe in the immortality of our souls. We believe that we're going to spend eternity somewhere forever and forever and forever. And this is what the psalmist said about that in Psalms 90, verses 5 and 6. He said, you bring our lives to an end just like a dream, and we are merely tender grass that sprouts and grows in the morning, but dries by the evening. And so our life is temporal, and we need to really wrap our minds around that. Everybody got really fearful about the coronavirus, and everybody thought half the world was going to die at that time, which was crazy. But the fact is we are going to die. Probably not from a virus, but probably by getting run over by a car, or, who knows, sick, getting old age, or, we're all going to die. But here's the truth. The choices that we make today are going to impact our eternity. I think of the words of Gladiator, General Maximus, and he says, "What we do now echoes for eternity." What a great line in that movie. And so here's the most important thing. This is what I want you to take away from this series, and especially this message today. There's a link between this life and eternity. This is huge. We need to understand that there's a link between this life and eternity. So Jesus not only gives us eternal life, but he also gives us abundant life to live right now in the here and now. And this is what he said in John chapter 10, verse 10. He said, "I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." Jesus said, "I've come to bring you life." And that word in the Greek is the word zoe, life, and it means life like God has it. Perpetual, vibrant, eternal life. But he says, not only have I come to give you life, but I've come to give you life more abundantly. And that means that word abundant means overflowing. That even now, right now, in this lifetime, life on planet Earth, we should have an overflowing life. In other words, his role, his purpose was to bring us this life in its fullness. And you and I have that. So for the next 30 days, we want to live abundant, overflowing, full lives. Just living life to its fullest. And maybe that means, less cluttered, less confusion, less overloaded, less overwhelmed. But whatever it means it's something that you and I can strive for. It's something that we can actually do. So here's the main text that we're going to look at, and then we'll unpack this, and then we'll move forward. Romans chapter 13, verses 11 and 12, Paul says this, "This is all the more urgent, for you know how late it is. Time is running out. Wake up, our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. So remove your dark deeds like dirty clothes and put on the shining armor of right living." Listen to what Paul's saying. Paul is saying time is running out, right? Time is always ticking, and it's running out. But he says we can put off things that aren't valuable and we can put on right living. So point number one is this. Live with a sense of urgency. If you knew today that you were going to die within 30 days, I believe that you would want to live with a sense of urgency. And what does that look like? That means time's running out. They did a survey a while back of a bunch of college students, hundreds of college students, and they asked them, they said, if you could know the exact date in which you were going to die, would you want to know? Do you know that 87%, the overwhelming majority of them said they wouldn't want to know? And I think that's partly because we deny our own mortality. We just believe that we're just going to live, longer. Even if we're 100, we believe we're going to live another couple years. And this mortality clock is ticking all the time. It's going on. And at the end of life, I think everyone just kind of asks themselves, what happened? Time went by so fast. I know when I was a minister of visitation, and I used to do a lot of hospital visits and a lot of nursing home visits, and I always loved getting around, senior citizens in their golden years. And I'd ask them the same question. I'd always ask them, how fast did your life go by? And they all of them said the same thing. It went by like that. It's just these were people in their 80s and 90s, and they said it seemed just like yesterday I was a teenager and, having fun, and now they're in their twilight years. And so a lot of times we face all these unfulfilled dreams that we might have had, these plans, these expectations, these lost opportunities, things that were left undone. And sometimes we have regrets, right? I know I have regrets. I wish I could have lived better and, had a higher character, but we're all falling into this thing together, right? And so one of the most dangerous words that we can rely on and lean on is this word, someday. Someday I'm going to do this, someday I'm going to do that. One of my favorite rock bands is Creedence Clearwater Revival, and they wrote a song, said, someday never comes. We always think that someday I'm going to have time to do things. And so some people say, someday I'm going to make it right with my mom or my dad, or someday I'm going to take that special vacation I want to take, or someday I'm going to have more time to spend with my kids, and someday I'm going to talk to my very best friend about a relationship with Jesus. But look at this slide. Someday I'll fill in the blank. What do you keep telling yourself that someday you're going to do? Because you need to do it, right? Don't procrastinate. I found on the website the other day a site called Procrastination, and I clicked on it and it said coming soon. You don't want to procrastinate. This was taken out of a Los Angeles paper, and it said a man returned to the house that he had grew up in. He had been gone for 20 years, and he returned to that house, and he went up in the attic, and he found an old jacket that was his from 20 years before, and he put it on, and he put his hands in his pocket, and he found a stub of a shoe repair shop where he had brought a pair of boots and never got them. And so he took that ticket and he went back into that old neighborhood, and lo and behold, that shoe repair shop was still open, and the same guy that was there 20 years before was still there. And so he walked in and he gave the guy the ticket and he says, "Hey, I want to get my boots." And the guy said, "Wait a minute." And he went behind the counter and he came back and he said, "They'll be ready Friday." 20 years later, right? As a leader, I took an assessment that is called Strength Finders 2.0. And you answer these 130 questions, and it prints out what your strongest strengths are. And they give you the 5 top that apply to you, because there's 37 different strengths that apply to humanity. And my number one strength was responsibility. So you can understand that I'm really not a person that procrastinates. I'm responsible. If there's something that needs to be done, I'm going to do it. I'm going to burn the candle at both ends, and I'm going to get it done. I can't stand procrastination, because to me that makes your life so stressful that after a while you fall behind the 8 ball and things start escalating and getting bigger than what you can actually deal with. And if you just do the jobs, do the things you need to do when you need to do them, you find that life goes a lot easier. And so, don't procrastinate. So what we want to do is we want to live. If we only have 30 days to live, we want to live with a sense of urgency, but urgency doesn't necessarily mean faster or busier, but rather that we're living with an awareness that none of us are promised someday. Someday I'll do this, someday I'll do that. You don't have someday. You're not promised a someday, because we never know. The clock is ticking. And so don't live in the past. Let it go. I mean, some of you have had bad pasts. You've had horrific things happen in your past, and you live with that like a monkey on your back, and maybe there's some unforgiveness. Maybe you've been, mistreated or backstabbed or even abused, and you're always living in the past, and so you got to stop that. You got to stop that right now. Just make a decision. It's not worth living with the baggage of the past. It's under the blood of Christ. Let it go. Start living an overflowing life, a life more abundant right now today, because you've only got 30 days to live. I want you to latch hold of that. If you only had 30 days. And the other side of that is don't fret about tomorrow. Some people are so concerned and worried about what if, tomorrow. Listen, Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 6, verses 27 through 30. He said, "Can your worries add a single moment to your life? And why do you worry about clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing. Yet Solomon, in all of his glory, was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for the wildflowers that are here today and thrown in a fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith?" And Jesus talked about, worrying about tomorrow and being concerned about tomorrow as having no faith. God, that's in God's hands, right? The past is under his blood, it's covered by his grace, and tomorrow is in his care. He's a providential God, and he's a beneficial God, and it's in his care. And so that leaves you and I to live in the now. So how am I going to live now if I know the clock is ticking and I only have 30 days left? How do I want to live? The psalmist put it this way in Psalms 118, Verse 24, this is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. What would it look like for you to begin to fully embrace today? What would it be like for you to fully live in the now? Rather than, being held back by the past or being driven by the future, to just live in the moment, live and enjoy the today. So point number 1 is live with a sense of urgency, all right? Point number 2 is live with a sense of eternity. Paul says this in Romans chapter 13, verse 11, wake up, for the coming of our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. And I love that, expressive claim. Wake up. Wake up. It's time, it's time to start living now because salvation is near. 30 days. That's all we've got. You and me, 30, if all of a sudden we went on the news and they said, a meteor is coming, an asteroid is coming, and it's going to strike this earth in 30 days, and we're all going to be dead. Humanity will be gone. Well, first of all, half the news agencies are going to blame Trump for the meteor, right? So, but what do we do? How do we live today in the light of eternity? And so don't take eternity for granted because we're talking about forever. It'll always be eternity. No matter how far we go through eternity, it will still always be eternity. Even if you live for 1,000 years in eternity, it's still eternity after that. If you live 15 million years in eternity, it's still eternity after that. You can't put timelines on it, but we can put timelines on the life we live now because we are under time. We're under the dimension, this linear thing of time. It's going by second by second, minute by minute, right? It's going by. So don't take eternity for granted. It's so important. You see, if all we do is chase the good life in this life, our minds never stop and reflect on eternity. If all we're doing is looking how we can, better our life and have that 401k and the new car and the new house and go, we never stop to reflect about what's really important. And that's the next life. That's the eternal life. And that's what Paul means when he says the coming of our salvation is nearer now because we're in that linear dispensation of time. Tomorrow it'll be a day closer. The day after that, a week after that, it'll be a week closer, right? Where, like I had a friend that always said, hey, I'm one day closer to eternity. You ask him, hey, how you doing? Great, I'm one day closer to the resurrection. And this is what it's talking about. Live now with a sense of eternity. You see, salvation is past, present, and future, right? We talk about its past tense. I must be born again. And at one point in time in my life, I accepted Christ into my life and I was born again. And that's in my past. And I'm being sanctified, right? I was saved. I'm being saved in the sense that I'm being sanctified, and that's a little bit dicier of a process because, I'm involved in that, and it doesn't go as good as God would like it, I'm sure, because I get in the way. But then I will one day be fully saved, and that's the word justified, or even glorified. I will be in eternity. My past will be a mood issue, and everything from that point on is forward. And I will be glorified and I will be justified. And so Paul is saying, you are rushing towards this appointment with destiny, with eternity. Wake up, live it right. The writer of Hebrews puts it this way in Hebrews 9:27, we die once and then we are judged. And that's why Jesus, when he was talking to Nicodemus, he said, you must be born again. He didn't say you should. It's optional. It's a suggestion. He said, you must be born again. I think it's in the book of Acts. It says, there's no other name under heaven by which we must be saved. We have to be saved if we're going to have a good future, a good eternity. And we need to recognize that this world is not our home. Because this is so temporal. This is such a brief period of time that it goes by like that, and it's not our home, that we're looking for an eternal kingdom, the kingdom of God, right? Everlasting. So I found this interesting that Winston Churchill when he was getting older, he actually planned his own funeral service. And he was laid to state, or this is what his request was, that he would be laid to state in London's St. Paul's Cathedral, that his casket was to be placed under the massive dome in the center of the cathedral, and that 2 trumpeters were to play. One would open the service by playing taps, and then the other one would close the service by playing reveille. Reveille is the wake-up call. Winston Churchill was saying, my faith is to be woken up in my eternal forever home. And I think that's what we're talking about here now, is that we live today in light of eternity. How would that affect you? How would that affect me if I only had 30 days left to live? How am I going to live? Because that's going to end, and I'm going to wake up in eternity. And the thing about eternity is there's no going back. When I'm there, I can't come back and make some changes, or I can't say someday I'm going to do this, or no, when that death has happened and the new life has taken place, there's no switching that around. It's happening. It's going to go on. So Paul says this. He says in 2 Corinthians 4:18, we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is seen is eternal. Think about that. All the things that we see, all the things that we enjoy, all the things that we rush in this lifetime, they're all temporal. But the eternal are the things that aren't seen. The eternal are the things that's in the kingdom of God. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, why do we spend all our time chasing after those things that are going to wear out, those things that are going to go out of style, those things that are going to break down, those things that are going to set aside and collect dust, or those things that will end up being on a garbage heap, and we use all of our energy, our life, on these things. We should have an appetite for something more, something eternal. See, we have to have a sense of urgency for those things that are eternal. So, number one, we live with a sense of urgency. Secondly, we live for a sense of urgency about eternity. And lastly, we live with a sense of priority. It's so important that we as people learn how to prioritize. Because this next fact kind of really got my attention. 30 days is only 720 hours. That's going to go by fast. 720 hours. I mean, a lot of that you're going to be sleeping, you're going to be eating, you're going to be stuck behind red lights. 720 hours are going to go by fast. So what are we going to do in that 720 hours? We have to have an eye on eternity and an eye on today. We have to have that prioritized in our lives, because priorities govern what I should do, where I should spend my time, and how I should behave. Paul said it this in Romans 13, verse 13 and 14. He said, don't live in the darkness. Get rid of your evil deeds. Shed the dirty clothes and clothe yourselves with armor of right living at those who live in the light. And so, this means an adjustment. This means a decision. This means an effort that I have to put forward, right? There are things that I need to take off. Now, what does that mean? In Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews said, let us let aside every sin and weight that entangles us. So there are some things, obviously, if there's something sinful that's displeasing to God, we've got to lay those things aside, right? We want to lay those things aside. We want to live for our God who's holy and just and who has saved us. But there are some things that are just weights. They're not necessarily sinful, but they're not necessarily beneficial. And like one of those things is actually found in the scriptures where Paul said bodily exercise is good for this present life, but it doesn't necessarily do anything for eternity. So there are things that are sinful, but they're weights. And sometimes these weights add to the frantic pace of our lives. We're like going, never stopping. And this is an age of continual activity. There's so many things people can get involved. Listen, when I was a kid, we had a basketball and we had a bicycle, right? And that pretty much limited what we did as kids. But nowadays, there's, dirt bikes and snowmobiles and snowboarding and hiking. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. All the toys that we can buy and amuse ourselves with. And sometimes in the business world or in the work world, we pride ourselves on our busyness. We almost wear our busyness like a badge, like, look how important I am because how busy I am. And sometimes that becomes a curse to our health. It can become a curse to our souls. It can become a curse to our relationships. I was coaching somebody, and we had got to a point where what was important in their life, and there was two factors left. One was financial security, and the other one was health. And do you want to sacrifice health for financial security? And so we coached around that, but in my mind I was thinking, there's no amount of money you can make, which represents how you're going to live life, versus your health, which represents, are you even going to live life, right? Health is so important, but we have to prioritize things and get them in order. So in coaching, especially when I start coaching somebody around wellness coaching, there's this understanding of the nervous system. In our nervous system, it's split in two. We have the sympathetic nervous system, and we have the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is just all recent information to neuroscience. But one of the things is that our sympathetic system is kind of like the gas pedal. It's what makes us go. It's like our reptilian brain of fight or flight, it's what drives us. But the parasympathetic system is like the brake. It what slows us down to allows us to rest, to allow us to recharge, such as resting, having moments of reflection and prayer, taking walks, those simple things, kind of like, take time to smell the coffee or take time to smell the roses. That's the parasympathetic system. And so when we're wellness coaching people, we talk about what are you doing to recharge that parasympathetic nervous system, because literally the sympathetic nervous system shuts down all the small capillaries in your body, so it immediately affects your digestive system, it immediately affects your cardiorespiratory system, and it immediately affects your brain. But the parasympathetic opens all the capillaries and allows everything to flow, and it brings health to your mind, to your emotions, to your body. It's so important that we understand that. Because you see, I believe if we really, really knew that we were dying, we wouldn't speed up. I believe that we would slow down. I believe that we would take a little bit more time to enjoy life, because Jesus wants to give us life abundantly, that we would savor the little things, that we would linger a little longer. I hike with some people, and man, they're impatient. You just spent half a day killing yourself to get on top of a mountain with these spectacular views, and within 5 minutes, like, they're ready to leave, and it's like, good night, linger, let's hang out here, let's enjoy this wonderful view. But the lingering that God isn't concerned about is in His presence. And the psalmist said this in Psalms 46, verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." In other words, just have a time of reflection. You know that old saying, count your blessings one by one? That opens up the parasympathetic nervous system. When you can just stop and say, you know what, God, maybe my life wasn't everything I wanted it to be, and I struggled here and I struggled there, but thank you for all the things that I can look back in my life and I saw your hand and I saw your faithfulness and I saw your provision. Thank you for that. Be still and know that God is God, right? Speed is the enemy of intimacy. Go, 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 and we never have time for God. Remember the top 10, right? The big 10 commandments? Keep the Sabbath holy. God designed us to have a day of rest. God designed us to have just a time of reflection, and even that, really, as Christians, we don't do that well. We go to church, and then we're right back into our frantic, lifestyles. And the idea of the Sabbath was to just slow down. Take a walk in the woods. Go out on a lake in a kayak or something. Slow down and enjoy the life that's around you. Take off the frantic pursuit for the good life and enjoy the life that's right there in front of you, because you've only got 30 days left and that clock is ticking. It's ticking. I wonder how many people get to the end of their lives and wish they'd taken more time for relationships. How important is that? Because I believe that when people are dying, they don't want to see their diplomas and their, certificates, and they don't want to see all their trophies and pictures of their cars or houses or whatever it might be. They want their friends. They want people to be around them. And so we need to invest into those relationships if we're going to be able to make deposits back from those relationships. So take off the frantic stuff, but put on more time for relationships. Remember, Paul said, let's take off some things and let's put on some things because time is running out and the day of salvation's coming. Take off those things that just aren't that valuable and put on time for relationships. Because you see, people are also eternal, right? People are eternal. And our relationship and their relationship with God is eternal. And Jesus spent huge blocks of time with God, the Father, and with people. You read the Gospels, and here he is spending a bunch of time with a tax collector who's sitting up in a sycamore tree. Or he spends a whole bunch of time with a blind guy that's on the side of a road. Or a diseased woman who's in desperate need of healing. Or children that everyone else feels are insignificant and ignored. And Jesus spent time with these people. People want to be noticed, right? They have a need to be noticed. Some people want you to pay attention. I remember when I first became a presbyter and I had oversight of 21 other churches, and I started calling pastors, and I got this one pastor, and he went on for a half an hour. And I never said a word, I just listened to him. I let him know that I was tracking, I was giving him those and yeah and huh. I was following with him. But people just want to be listened to. Listen, as a life coach, one of the biggest things we're trained to do is listen actively. Really listen to what people are divulging of themselves, because people, we really have that need to share who we are with one another. And so don't let things go unsaid to loved ones around you. I remember my dad, towards the later years of his life, there was a day that he wasn't feeling well, and I had called him up, and as we were on the phone, at the end of the conversation, he said, "Hey, I love you." And it dawned on me that that was the first time in 49 years I had ever heard my father say, "I loved you." And how sad is that? 49 years went by, and he just didn't have the ability or didn't have the emotional strength or whatever it was to tell his son, one of his kids, that he actually loved them. Now, I'm so thankful that in the last few years, we shared that so much more. We never ended a conversation. Usually I would say it first and he would echo it, but that's fine. At least we were saying, "Hey, I love you. I love you too." And that's so healing. That's so rewarding. That's so enriching. And so the people in your life, invest in them. You've only got 30 days left. Don't let those words go unsaid. Tell somebody that needs to hear it from you that you love them. Because it's not about getting the kids to soccer practice, and it's not about who's going to fix dinner and when, and it's not about who's going to pick up the dry cleaning. What it is about is sit down with your daughter or your son and let them know how you feel about them. Call your aging parents and let them know how you feel and how appreciative you are. Maybe they weren't the greatest parents, but you know what? Take the high road. Who cares? Be grateful. Be appreciative. Stop chasing stuff. There's no reward in stuff. Stop living for the approval of others, but learn to value the next 30 days by disinvesting stuff that isn't important and reinvesting in things that aren't. So living like you are dying, it's more about today than it is about tomorrow. It's more about people than it is about possessions. And it's more about God's priorities and less about my plans. It's more about the eternal and less about the temporal. If you're watching this broadcast and you are not in a relationship with Jesus Christ, earlier in this message I said, our salvation is past, present, and future. In the past, you must be born again. And if you're not born again, if you've never entered into a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, His Son, I implore you. It's as simple as just bowing your heart, your knees before God and saying, "God, if you will have me the way I am, I feel like I've kind of made a mess of my life. I feel like I'm not facing my eternal future. And I ask you to come into my life and prioritize my life and help me, forgive me of my sin and cleanse me and help me to live for you." If you will do that, Jesus said, "Whoever comes unto me, I will not cast aside." The Bible says, whoever calls on the Lord will be saved. So I want to encourage you to do that. Just simply call on Him. Say, "Jesus, come into my heart, save me." And for those of you that are saved and you're in this relationship, I want you to know that Jesus wants to give you abundant life. An abundant life is not burning the candle at both ends and in the middle just so that you can get to the age of retirement and have a cushy life, because you may not make it to that specific age. I know a lot of people that had plans of what they were going to do when they retired, and they died before they retired. Wasted, right? Live life to its fullest now. Slow down, enjoy life, live with a sense of urgency, live with a sense of eternity, and live with a sense of priority. You know why? Because the clock is ticking. And I'll see you again in 7 days.